So with that, I think I'm going to go ahead and we'll start the introduction. That way we can be considerate of people's time, because I know everybody's probably busy and has other things they might need to get off to. My name is Tori Blackwell. I am a biology faculty member here at Clackamas Community College, teaching the science department. And I am the faculty lead on the Build Exito grant here at Clackamas Community College. It's a grant that's designed to increase the number of students that from underrepresented communities that go on to pursue advanced degrees in biomedical research. Biomedical research is a really broad area. It encompasses a lot of fields, and the big things we try to encourage through Build is having people with different lenses and different perspectives become part of that work. Because what happens is if everybody that does that work is the same, they tend to come up with the same types of questions and the same types of ways to answer those questions. And sometimes the answers end up not being very accurate, especially when it comes to doing work within specific types of communities. So the more perspectives we can get on doing that type of work, the better the work is, and the more people can be properly supported and helped by that research. So today, it is my extreme pleasure to welcome Candice Stauffer to our STEM Talk, our first STEM Talk of the 2020 school year. Candice is a PhD student. She's studying physics and astronomy at Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois. She graduated from Portland State University with a BS in physics in 2018 and a proud Cougar from 2016. She was actually in our first Build Exito cohort. I think she doesn't realize it. She may realize it now, but she probably doesn't realize that she would ask us all the time, like, what's next? What should I be doing? What's going on? And we really had no idea, because it was the first year of the program and we were pretty much figuring it out while she was figuring it out. So it's really great that, one, she suffered through us, and two, that she went on to PSU and has been really, really super successful in that process. She has a lot to tell us about how she has managed to navigate both a place that many of us are familiar with, Clackamas Community College, but also Portland State University, which I know is a place that people are kind of thinking about. Okay, what is it going to look like if I decide to transfer there, and how's that process look? And then being able to go beyond that, because I know sometimes it's hard to see, if it's hard to see how you're going to get through your Zoom classes this term, I could see it being even more difficult to figure out what's after your associates, what's after your bachelor's degree. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Candice.
Oh, thank you so much, Tori. And thank you so much for inviting me. It's so good to see so many of you too. I mean, see you, but yeah, I'm really happy to be talking here again. So let me see if I can share my screen. And is that visible for everyone? Yes? Okay. Yeah, so my name is Candice Stauffer. I'm a PhD student at Northwestern in physics and astronomy, and of course, an alumni of Clackamas Community College. And let me see if I can figure out how to go next. Okay, so I'm going to take you on a cosmic journey today. I'm going to start and I'm going to talk about my academic pathway, because I figure, maybe a lot of you here are, students at Clackamas yourselves. So I want to talk about that. And I'll spend some time talking a little bit about the research I'm doing at Northwestern too, and kind of how going through Clackamas and PSU and Build Exito kind of led me here. So I'll talk about my research group at Northwestern, some stuff about supernovae I'm looking into, and then, all about the exciting future research coming up. So I'll start with kind of my path through academia, which started at Clackamas Community College, of course. And this is like where I began to study physics. So that's like a picture of me and Greg Bostrom's physics class. It was the first physics class I ever took there.
Candice,
Yeah.
I just want to interrupt you for a second. I'm so sorry. I think what we're seeing on your screen isn't what you intend us to be seeing right now.
Oh,
So
okay.
we're not seeing your slideshow. I think we're seeing your desktop.
Oh, no. Okay. Here, let me pause. Okay. Sorry about that. Is that any better, or is it still my desktop?
There you go. That's perfect.
Okay. Okay. And if I
Yay.
okay, sorry about that. Okay, so this was my intro slide. Very exciting, in case you missed it. Okay, here's the outline. Talked about that. Okay, so yes, this is my kind of academic path. I started at Clackamas Community College. That's me and Greg's class. And I did a bunch of stuff at CCC. I did STEM club and student government, and I just had a really, really great time, I think, at Clackamas. And yeah, I kind of started like with my research here through Build Exito, which was really helpful because I think within the first year I had an idea that I wanted to do research and I wanted to do science, but of course I didn't really know where I wanted to how to get started on that. And I think Build Exito really helped me out and helped me like kind of find my identity as a scientist, I guess. And we started with a bunch of my friends. We started the STEM club there. I don't know if it's still going on. You'll have to tell me if it's still active. I think before at least COVID was happening, it was still active. And I was a math tutor, which was great. And yeah, student government. And Build Exito was great because it also helped me transfer to Portland State and help me get a research group there. So the research that I was doing at PSU was very different in a lot of ways from what I'm doing now. Now I'm studying some of the biggest things in the universe, and there I was looking at some of the smallest stuff in the universe. So I was studying nanoparticles and creating these catalysts that degraded volatile organic compounds. And it was, I think it was Build Exito that, of course, set me up with this research group and kind of helped me make that transfer into research and into university. And so I did my bachelor's of science in physics there. I worked with Dr. Zhen Zhao. And then I graduated in 2018. And now I'm at Northwestern, where it's very cold all the time. Yeah, it snowed for the first time on Monday, and we got more yesterday. So it's very cold here. And this was like a picture from the lunar eclipse that was happening last year, and it was below freezing, and we all had to stand outside and, watch the moon while we were all very cold. And so here I'm doing my PhD in physics and astronomy. I'm doing that in the Department of Physics and Astronomy, but I'm within a group called the Center for Interdisciplinary Exploration and Research in Astrophysics. And I work with Dr. Raphael and Margutti. I also have like an interest in data science, so I'm in this fellowship. And I'm learning a lot about data science because from what I'll show you, a lot of astrophysics now is just, it's data, I tried to find a lot of beautiful pictures to show you, but a lot of what I'm doing with my day is going through data and trying to make sense of it. And I'm also part of a collaboration called the Young Supernova Experiment. But to tie this back kind of to CCC and PSU and Exito, I just feel really grateful that I started out at CCC, and I think it's not, starting out at a community college isn't a path that like a lot of my peers have taken, but I'm really happy that I did, because I feel like at Clackamas, you know, I got a lot smaller class sizes, and I was able to build relationships with people that are still very much like in my life today, not just friends, but, you know, mentors too. You know, Tori is one of my best mentors, and Drake Mitchell and Matthew Altman, and all of these people are kind of people that I met either through Clackamas or Build Exito, which is an opportunity I got because of Clackamas Community College. So yeah, I think I really, any success I have, I think I really, you know, attribute to starting out in such a place that gave me such a great community and was so like encouraging, you know. So I'll talk a little bit about my group here now too. So now at Northwestern, these are my group members, and we have our advisor, our professor, Rafael Marcuti, along with a bunch of postdocs and graduate students. There's me. And our team is called the Multi-Wavelength Transient Research Team. That's our unofficial title anyways. And I'll talk a little bit about what that means and what we do, because all of our research, we collaborate on some things, but we're all tied together by our research in transients and studying transients in multi-wavelengths, multiple wavelengths. So I will talk about first what is a transient exactly. And you can think of a transient sort of as just that, something that's transient within the universe. So think of things that are very active or explosive, as the title of my presentation suggests. If you think about like a supernova or something exploding in space, it's only there for a limited amount of time. So we call those things like supernovae and gamma ray bursts and tidal disruptions, which I won't get as much into, transient events. Whereas if you think about something like our Milky Way galaxy, for example, within our lifetimes, we're not going to see something like that change. So these, when you hear me say the word transient, think of explosions, you know. So what does it mean that our group studies these in multiple wavelengths? Well, they're within the electromagnetic spectrum. You have different wavelengths and frequencies of light. And what makes our group different is that we study space in all of these different frequencies as opposed to just one. So we'll study events that occur in radio waves, which we use big satellites to get detections from. But the same radio waves that are coming from supernova are the same radio waves that, you know, transmit phone calls and what you hear on AM, FM radio. You know, all the way to visible light, which is the light we see, and, you know, up to UV and X-ray light. So, and you can see in this image of the Milky Way galaxy that all has pictures in these different wavelengths. And so from each of these different wavelengths, we can see something kind of different or unique that we couldn't just see in one. But a lot of astronomy will focus on one specific wavelength. And the reason why is because different events, different astronomical objects in the universe, they have different temperatures, which means their brightness or their luminosity is going to peak in a certain wavelength of light. So like the event horizon of a black hole, they peak in gamma rays. You know, supernova remnants, their light will be the brightest in X-rays. Planets, their light's the brightest in visible wavelengths of light we can see. And like electrons and magnetic fields around magnetars or neutron stars. are the brightest in radio wavelengths of light. But for my research and for our group, our kind of motto is that we leave no photon behind, because we believe that looking at these objects in many different wavelengths can tell us different stories about the object we're looking at. So we don't use just one kind of light to make our observations. So I'll start talking a little bit about supernovae now, because this is my specific topic of research. And I first just want to show you a remnant of a supernova called a Crab Nebula. And this is a pretty well-known one. And this just goes through to show all the different wavelengths of light this can be observed in. And you'll see as we're going through these wavelengths of light, in each picture, you can see something a little bit different about the Crab Nebula. And that's why it's so important to me to look at supernovae in many different ways. And so, for example, a lot of the pictures like you might see when you go to NASA's website and look at images from the Hubble Space Telescope or something, they're images that are composed of many of these different wavelengths to give you kind of a full image of what something looks like. And you can see when you put everything together, here you have radio, and infrared and optical and UV light. You can get a really beautiful picture. So, but now I want to answer the question, which maybe you have been asking yourself, is what exactly is a supernova? And a supernova, in the simplest way that I can tell you about it, is a star that is dying violently. And the way that we see it, if you were to have a really great telescope and you were to look up in space, looks just like a little dot of light. So here's an image of this galaxy before any supernova went off in it. And then here's an image after the supernova went off. And what's amazing about this is that this galaxy, is hundreds of light years away, but that this supernova event is so bright that even despite all of the stars in the background and everything else that's illuminated here in this image, this supernova has so much energy that it's outshining the entire galaxy, which I just think is incredible, that we can look so far away and see this light still. That's how powerful supernovae are. But to sum it up, yeah, a supernova is an old star that has died and exploded. So supernovae are how stars die. But why do they happen exactly? And to answer that question, we're going to talk a little about how stars kind of exist in the first place. And they are able to stay stable because stars, even the stars like our sun, are so incredibly massive that the core begins to get so hot and build up so much pressure that it can fuse elements together, all the way up to iron. So there's this nuclear fusion that's happening in the core of stars, just like our sun. And that fusion creates so much energy and heat and pressure that it's able to push the shells of the star outward. But not too much, just enough to where the mass of the star is held up by this pressure. So the gravity and the pressure from the fusion in the core are perfectly balanced to hold together this star. And we call this hydrostatic equilibrium. But eventually, a star, as it ages, it's going to run out of fuel. It's going to run out of things to fuse together. And that's just the beginning of the end. So what happens when the core runs out of fuel? Well, you stop getting that outward pressure from fusion. So that pressure stops. And all that you have left is the gravity crushing the star inwards. And that gravity is so heavy and so massive that the core collapses. The core literally collapses within the star in a matter of seconds. And then, because there's nothing holding the star together, or because there's nothing, holding the star up anymore, you have an explosion, and and the star goes supernova. And you can kind of think about it like if you had a water bottle or maybe a water balloon, and you squeezed it really hard, all of the pressure you're putting on the water bottle or the water balloon would burst out and kind of an explosion. And so I think that you can think about a supernova in the same way, where gravity is pushing in on the star so hard and there's nothing left to hold the supernova together again, that it explodes. And so I have a little demonstration of that here. So you see the core collapse, which is about right there. And then after the core collapses, you have this explosion. So the core will collapse in a matter of seconds, but the shock will travel through the star within a matter of hours. And the supernova the light from the supernova will be around for several days before it fades. But of course, you have to remember that a lot of these supernovae are many, many light years away, hundreds of light years away sometimes. So really what we're looking at is this explosion taking place hundreds and hundreds of years ago, which is pretty exciting because it's like we're quite literally looking back in time. And we'll go to the next slide. So now that we know that supernova are these dying stars, and we get them because the fusion that takes place in the core has no longer any fuel to fuse, and we get a supernova. I'll talk about the different kinds of supernovae that can kind of exist. And the two main types that you'll hear about if you're watching, a nova documentary or something are the type 1 and type 2 supernovae. And we classify these different supernovae basically based on what they're made of, or what the stars they came from were made of. And so these type 1 supernovae, they don't have any hydrogen, whereas type 2 do. And then you'll also hear me talk a little bit about type 1a supernovae, which is here in green. And the difference between something that's a type 1a supernovae and something that's not is that these have silicon in them. And here we go. So my questions kind of revolve around like what causes certain types of supernovae. We talked about them coming from stars, but there's a lot of argument about what kinds of stars they come from. And so for type 1 supernovae, the consensus is basically that there are two different kinds of progenitors that can form these type 1 supernovae. And when I say progenitors, I just mean stars that formed those supernovae in the first place. There is a double degenerate system, which consists of two white dwarfs. And those are just smaller, but still massive stars that are revolving around each other. And when they collide, they go supernova. Or there's a single degenerate star, which still involves a white dwarf star. But instead of another white dwarf star, there's also a much larger star. And that can be a lot of different kinds of larger stars. But the point is that there is this larger star. And the smaller star, the white dwarf star, starts taking mass from that larger star. And sometimes this might seem counterintuitive because you might think if the larger star is so much more massive, it would have more gravity. It would have more of a gravitational pull. Why wouldn't it pull away from the smaller star? Why does the smaller star get all of the mass from the larger star? And that's because when you have this larger star, the material on the outside of the star isn't as tightly bound to the star. The material on the outside isn't as tightly bound to the star. And so it's kind of, it can easily be pulled away. And so this very massive small star that's compact and it's held together really well is able to kind of grab that leftover stuff on the outside from the larger star and pull it in until once again, it becomes so massive that it begins to collapse in on itself and it starts, to go supernova and die. And so for the remainder of this talk, I think you should just consider this single degenerate scenario, which I'll talk more about with SN 2014 DT. So this is a project I've been working on since I started at Northwestern, and it is a supernova that is in the M61 galaxy. It's 300,000 light years away. And we think supernovae like this come from a single degenerate scenario. In fact, we think all type 1AX supernovae come from a single degenerate scenario. So SN 2014 DT, it's like I was talking about in that diagram, it's under the category of a type 1 supernova, and specifically a type 1AX supernova. And this single degenerate scenario is what we commonly think forms supernovae like these. But what's very strange and odd about this supernova in particular is that it has a really low luminosity and low energy. And we're not really sure why, because when we look at what it's composed of, we see that it has the exact same elements that we would see in one of those other type 1A supernovae that I was talking about. So you would think that a supernova like this would explode in the exact same way that all of those other supernovae explode in, but it doesn't. And instead, it doesn't look as bright and it doesn't have a very high energy, and we're not sure why. So the question that I'm trying to ask now in the research I do here is, why is there such a low luminosity and energy, and what other star could have formed this supernova? So we know that one of the stars is probably a white dwarf star, but what kind of star could this be? So that is my question. And there are a lot of different kinds of options of what that other star could be. So like I said, we know there's a white dwarf here, but what's the companion star? What's the big star? And yeah, so there's lots of different kinds. There's a lot of different options to choose from. And you don't really need to understand exactly, everything about these stars to understand the concept of just it being a big question to find out what these companion stars are. So these are kind of our options, and you can just keep that in mind for later. So I will get a little bit more in depth for this part, and just bear with me because this is might look a little dense, but I will explain it. So like I said, doing astronomy and astrophysics, I wish that I could just sit and look at pictures all day, but what I've learned, at least about science and especially astronomy and astrophysics, is that, there's a lot of data involved, and there's a lot of work that goes into, you know, making the beautiful images and conclusions that you see in astronomy when you're just looking at it, you know, online. So all of this comes from just a set of data. And what you're seeing here is radio points of light from different supernovae, including 2014 DT. And it doesn't matter much in this context what all of this other stuff means. I'm just showing you how I look at this supernova and make sense out of it. And I just want to point out that this looks like 4 points for this supernova, but it's really just one single point because we're unsure about exactly when it exploded, and we're unsure about exactly how bright. But we know that somewhere around this time, it's about this luminosity. And we did the same thing with X-rays. So this is where we pull in like different parts of the electromagnetic spectrum to look at the supernova. And we get something like this. Now this I feel like looks overwhelming too, but what you should take away from it is something really amazing, actually, I think, because with just one single point from this supernova, knowing the physics about these types of supernova, we're able to predict what 2014 DT looked like over a longer period of time. So like I showed you in the animation, you see that when a supernova explodes, it starts out, you know, at a lower luminosity. It gets to a point where it's at its brightest, and then it kind of fades away. And so if you just take a look at one of these plots, they're all the same with slightly different variations. But if you just take a look at this general curve, so maybe I'll even try and draw on it. So if you just take a look at this general curve right here, we were able to gather that the way that this supernova exploded kind of went in that shape, which I think is so cool too, because in astronomy, you can take so little data and make so much sense of it from knowing, you know, a little bit about physics. And what this light curve, we call it light curve, what this tells us is it can tell us the density of the environment around it. So these light curves can tell us what stuff was around the supernova when it exploded. So if you think about it, if you're shining a light, you know, down the street, you'll see a very bright light. But now imagine you put a bunch of fog between you and the light source. That light is going to appear differently. It'll be more dispersed. Maybe it'll be dimmer, depending on like what kind of fog it is. And it's the same kind of thing with supernovae. So we can tell, based on what this light curve looks like, we can tell kind of what's in the way. And that's when I get this crazy looking plot, which I will tell you about in a second. But from all of that data, what we're able to do is see how much, from that fog that's in the way, we're able to see how much mass, how much stuff from the star that existed before the supernova went off is in the way of the light that we're seeing from it. So this data is what tells us what kind of star was there before. So it can help tell us, it can help narrow down the answers of what kind of star made this supernova happen. So we'll put that away. So now if you think back to the last slide, we think, okay, so what possibly could this star that created this supernova be? And if you look at these red lines, which are right here and here, we can say that everything below these red lines are stars that we could have ruled out. And we found these lines by looking at those light curves that I was showing you earlier, those crazy looking plots that I showed you. And using this, we were able to rule out a few stars. So we can say there are no red giant stars that could have caused this supernova. So it was, it can't be that star. We're also able to rule out these luminous blue variable stars, which are about right here. And we can rule out also some of these Wolf-Rayet stars, and we can rule out some of these symbiotic stars as well. But what we aren't able to take away at all, what we aren't able to eliminate from the possibilities at all are these helium stars. So right here, and also main sequence stars, which are right here. So stars just like our sun. So when I first looked at this, I was kind of disappointed because, you know, we can only rule out a couple of stars from having created SN 2014 DT. But we also know that other people have done research on other supernovae like SN 2014 DT. And so there was another paper that was published about a very similar supernova called SN 2012Z. And if you saw earlier in those plots, I showed where the luminosity of this was too, compared to my supernova. But what they found was that when looking at this explosion, they found helium in the spectrum. When they were looking at the supernova, they saw that the supernova looked blue. It looked like a bluish color. And this indicated to the people looking at this supernova that there was probably helium in that explosion. And since we know that there's helium in other supernovae like 2014 DT, combined with the fact that with our research, we can't rule helium stars out, it makes me think that the most possible star that could have formed a supernova like this was probably a helium star. And so I think that's really exciting. And real quick too, I just want to point out, because this is another one of those images that I just think, if you look at a little closely, is pretty amazing. And these top images right here are images of the sky before the supernova went off. Okay, so it's just images of kind of the background, no supernova. But then if you look in these two sets of images right here, if you look right here and then here, you can see that a flash of light occurs. And that's where the supernova was going off. And here is probably one of the companions, one of the companion stars to the white dwarf that was accreting matter. So I think that's exciting. And so I want to talk about some of something called the Young Supernova Experiment. And this is really exciting because the difficult thing about transients and about supernovae is that we don't know how or when they're going to go off. So we can't predict when a supernova is going to happen. Something like 2014 DT, like I was telling you about, we didn't know that was going to explode. You kind of catch these things by not by chance, but by accident, I guess. And so what we do to find supernovae is we have these telescopes all over the world that are constantly scanning parts of the sky, constantly. And I don't ever get to go to them, but we tell these telescope operators to point the telescopes in certain parts of the sky to get our observations. But in addition, they're constantly scanning the sky. And so when something goes off, we can look back at old parts of the sky and compare it to new images that we're constantly taking and tell if there's a difference or something bright in that area. And there's thousands and thousands of supernova that go off every night. They're always happening, which I just think is amazing, but they're so far away that we're not able to see all of them, of course, with our naked eye. They're happening in other galaxies a lot of the times. And this young supernova experiment, it uses this Pan-STARRS telescope, and they send us and my group and a bunch of other collaborators around the United States all of these images they're taking every night. And then every single week, we go through images like the ones that I'm showing you here, and we try to find out if there are supernovae, interesting supernovae in these galaxies. And so that's our job, which is very tedious but exciting because we're kind of on the forefront of discovering new objects, but it also takes a lot of work to go through these images by eye and this photometry by eye to find out if there's something interesting that we want to study. And so now I'm going to get into another crazy looking plot because, like I said, it's not these beautiful images that, it's not these beautiful images that I'm getting to go through every night. What it really is a bunch of data and photometry that looks a lot like this. And what we're looking for when we're looking for new supernovae, like within the young supernova experiment, is supernovae that are just that young. So like I said, we don't know, we can't tell when a supernova is about to go off. We can't predict necessarily that a star is about to explode, or at least we can't very easily. So the next best thing you can do to find a supernova that might be interesting is to find it when it's very, very young. So to do that, it's not like we can just go through these images like this and find one of those, bright points of light. We have to look at actual photometric data. So it's like a photon will come into our telescope and tell us, and then we get the data back of what its color looks like, how bright it was, and just a bunch of information about that light. And so to tell how young a supernova is, we look at its color. And so that's what this crazy looking plot is trying to tell you, that all of the supernovae in these upper right-hand corner are blue. So they appear blue. But all of these supernovae in the bottom right-hand corner are kind of a reddish color. And by studying them, we found that more likely the blue supernovae are going to be younger. And the red supernovae are more likely to not be young or kind of be older. And so what I mean when I say young too is that, the supernova has just gone off. So like an older supernova would be a supernova that's already reached its peak brightness. But of course, we want to study a supernova when they're at their brightest. And so we want to get these young supernovae. And again, here, that's what this bar up here is telling you, is just that, so young supernova explosion would be after 0 days after it exploded, while an older supernova explosion would, be down on this side of the spectrum. And you see that this kind of bar is telling you that younger supernova will be bluer and older supernova will be kind of redder. But when we're looking at the photometry, when we're looking at the actual data gathered from the telescopes, we look at something like this. So again, a bunch of data and not something too beautiful. Well, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. It becomes beautiful after a while, I guess. But what we're looking for is these, we put different filters on our telescopes. And we have a filter that we use often that filters green light, and we have a filter that filters the red light. And so what we're looking for is the observations taken with the green filter to be brighter than the observations taken with the red filter. And that's how we can see how blue or red the supernova is at that point in time. So when the supernova is young, so right around here, when the supernova is young, you can see that the green has a much higher magnitude, and when the supernova is older, it has the green has a much lower magnitude. Yeah, and this project is really exciting because we get to discover new explosions in the universe. And I just want to kind of finish by talking about the things that we plan to do in the future. So I know that I talked a little bit about 2014 DT, which is a supernova that I'm studying. And 2014 DT exploded 6 years ago now. That's where the name comes from. Supernova are named by the year in which they exploded. And so there's not much, that light curve that I was talking about, it's no longer bright anymore. You can see as time goes on, you know, the luminosity of supernovae goes way down. And so there's not much we can do with that anymore, but there are a lot of new things to discover. With the young supernova experiment I was talking about, for example, but the problem that I'm interested in looking at now is how do we manage all of that data? How do we go through and find things that are interesting to look at? Right now, there are people within my group that are on call every week to constantly be going through, you know, plots like this to discover what's interesting. But that takes a lot of manpower. And of course, we want to spend our time doing science. So, but the more observations we get, the more data we have. And so I think advancing the machine learning and data science side of it is really important in finding new supernovae. And also coming up are new telescopes. Like the New Generation VLA, which is a radio telescope, and the Vera Rubin Observatory, which is here, and this is in Chile. It's named after Vera Rubin, and she helped discover dark matter. Very interesting woman. And this will discover thousands of supernova every night, which is crazy. And it's also a massive amount of data. And so I'm looking forward to that coming into operation hopefully within the time that I'm in graduate school, to find more interesting transients to look at. But of course, our ability to process data will need to get a lot better too. So with that, I hope that kind of helps give you a good understanding about what I'm doing with supernovae and kind of the forefront of research that we're on right now. And I would be so happy to talk or answer any questions about this research, or just about my path here to Northwestern from CCC in the first place. I think something I forgot to mention too was when I was talking about coming from Clackamas Community College, is it was one of my mentors from Clackamas Community College that told me about an internship that, or told me about the series of internships called REUs, Research Experience for Undergrads, which was a program I did at Northwestern. And REUs are at a whole bunch of different universities, but the one I did was at Northwestern. And it was my mentor from Clackamas Community College that told me about this opportunity. So I think going back to CCC, it's just, you know, I couldn't have been here at Northwestern had I not met like these amazing mentors that I've had told me about all of these opportunities. So thank you, CCC, and thanks for listening to my talk about supernovae.
Okay, I think it's fair if people want to unmute and give Candice a round of applause, that would be great. And we can also have people, if you have questions, you can type them into the chat and I will read them off for Candice.
Thanks. I think it's the first round of applause I've heard in like months.
So I do see your first question from Gregory Carr, and it is, so a helium star is a helium core whose hydrogen has been stripped off. So that's what he was asking about the helium star.
Yeah, so a helium star, let me go back to the slide. Yeah, so this is, the hydrogen has been stripped off. So stars are mostly, they mostly have hydrogen and helium in their spectrum, and then the hydrogen has been stripped off of these helium stars, and we just have like an excess amount of helium in these helium stars. Yeah, and that's our main prediction right now for 14DT.
Next question I have for you is if you have any advice to give when an undergrad just wants to give up.
Oh my gosh. So here, I'll give you like a TMI time. I think like my first, it was the second quarter of physics at Clackamas. It was so hard. I mean, I think I cried every single week, like in class. So because I would get so stressed out and it was so difficult. So I think there were a lot of times I wanted to give up, but I think really the thing that helped me a lot was finding like a good support system and people who could just encourage me when I was feeling bad or I was feeling like I wanted to give up, to just kind of give me some perspective that I could do it. And I think it can be tough, but you can get through it and find good people and good friends and good mentors. That would be my advice.
All right. The next question from the chat is, you mentioned that the 2014 star exploded in 2014. Is that just when its explosion became visible to us? Yeah,
so really this star is thousands and thousands of light years away from us. So really it actually, exploded a long, long time ago, but we first saw the explosion occur in 2014. It was like October 27th in 2014.
I know I saw another question in here. So next question is, how did you figure out you wanted to go into this field? Did you have any other fields in mind at first? What made you change? I guess if you did.
Yeah, I think I figured it out kind of quickly. I remember, I always really liked astronomy. And I think when I didn't feel like I was very good at math in high school. And then I got to Clackamas and I started doing pretty well in all of my math classes and my science classes. And so I kind of thought, oh, like maybe I can do this. And there were a few other things I considered aside from astrophysics, but I think this was just the most interesting to me. And I do remember, because Build Exito, when it was first starting, I didn't really understand that it was for health, and medical science. exactly. And I think everyone else was sort of like lost about how that would go too. So I remember, but by the second year of being in Exito, I remember we all were in our cohort and everyone was going around saying, you know, what they wanted to do within Exito. And it was like, you know, I want to go on and be a doctor, or I want to go do clinical research. And then they came to me and they asked what I want to do. And I was like, oh, I want to like study black holes. And it was kind of embarrassing, but yeah, so I think once I decided I wanted to do science, I think I don't know, I just love I love the universe, so it was kind of natural.
So I will cheat and say that the same types of algorithms, and I think even sometimes the same types of data processing programs that are used for that type of analysis is what biologists will use too when they're doing like co-localization studies and trying to figure out where proteins are at. Because even some of those pictures, I was like, oh, that looks like a neuronal cell with a bunch of vacuoles, and they're trying to transport things from this place to this place. And if I wanted to know how it was moving, then I would use that same type of like data processing to do it. So there are like connections sometimes that people don't think, like stars, what do they have to do with the rest of us? Oh, wow.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I know. I mean, I know a lot of biologists here too. A lot of my friends here are biologists, and it is just a lot of data. I think like data science and learning to code, not to sound like super cliche, but it's like I think that's just what a lot of science is right now. And I even saw that like doing research at PSU. You know, it's like weeding through data and figuring out how to make sense of it. So learn to code.
Okay, I'm going to throw in one more crowd question, and then I want to throw in a question from Drake because he had something.
Okay.
What's your biggest frustration as a researcher?
I think having to, I think I make a lot of mistakes. I end up having to do things over and over again. I guess it's just progress is never as fast as you want it to be. You never finish the paper, it seems like, as fast as you want it to finish it. Like research is just slow and it can be really tedious. And I think when you put it all together like this, you can make it look really beautiful. But on a day-to-day basis, like it can just be really slow and sometimes kind of boring. Like, I mean, I love it still, but I don't want to sugarcoat it. Like it's sometimes kind of boring. And so that can be frustrating because sometimes you just want to get the answer, you know? Yeah.
Okay, we got some more questions that popped up in the chat. I just want to let people know that it is 5:30. So if you do have to be someplace, then we totally understand. Candice, are you okay with hanging out for a few more minutes to answer questions?
Yeah,
okay.
Of course. I'm gonna stop sharing.
So let me get back to that question. How do you approach learning in a field like data science when you have a specific use case in mind? Do you focus on areas that seem particularly relevant, or just take the courses as offered and apply on your own?
So I didn't initially start taking classes. Like I do a lot of coding in Python, and I kind of learned that on my own. And then later on, like in my second year of graduate school, I started taking classes. But I think it's totally manageable to just learn how to do that on your own too. But classes and how to do it like in your specific field. But I think, you know, learning as much as you can about programming and data is not a bad thing either. I mean, if you can manage to fit a class in there, why not?
Which actually leads to a perfect follow-up question. And what programming language would be best to learn?
Ooh, I mean, for what I do and for what I know that most people in my circle do, not necessarily just astronomy, but I think Python. And I think Python is the most useful. That's what I have always used, other than sometimes MATLAB. Yeah, Python mainly, I think. But it depends on your field too.
And then one last chat question. Would the radio telescope be better overall or only for certain applications? Could there be something better than a radio telescope?
Well, it really depends what you're looking at. So like our group motto is, every photon counts, or no photon left behind. So the radio can always tell you something, but there are different things that it's best for, and it does allow you to see different things within the supernova. So for example, we might be able to see the most, like if a supernova goes off, we need to look at the radio data right away, because it comes at a certain time where we need to see the radio, the wavelengths of light from the radio right away, because it's going to go away fast. But X-rays, for example, you can wait longer to look at X-ray light from the supernova. So it's not that radio is like the best thing to use, or any other wavelength of light is the best thing to use. There are certain objects in the sky that emit more radio waves than others. But it's more about, I think, the timing of something going off, where radio would be really good versus optical or X-ray wavelengths.
All right, so I know Drake had a question, so I was going to ask him to unmute and ask.
Oh, thanks, Drake.
Fabulous talk, Candice. Really, really good. Lots. I mean, I appreciate all the steps. I got about 5 questions, but I'm going to limit it. But first of all, I want to say that I can tell you're going to be a big success in the business, because you're already saying that research is tedious and frustrating, but I'm sticking with it.
Yeah.
You're already over the, oh my God, this is actually work phase.
Okay. That's good to know. Fine. Okay.
I think I understand at least some pieces of the strength you folks get from using all the multi-wavelength stuff.
Okay, good.
But following up on the last question, just to make it at the extreme, so radio's fabulous because it goes through dust.
Yeah.
We got who knows how much stuff we got between us and whatever you happen to be seeing, right?
Right.
And then you'll be windows, and there'll be things that obscure and X-ray. Do you have to account for that, or is there things in the signal that tell you, okay, we got to really diminish X-ray, but it's probably because there's a lot of crap in the way. We got to here, we got some optical, and then whatever. It's going to be all over the map. Do you have to account for that?
Like if there's stuff, you mean like if there's like some other thing between us and the supernova, like some other object.
It's in another galaxy on the far side of the other galaxy, just the way things happen to line up or whatever. Or
Yeah.
Mostly I was thinking about the thing you were talking about. We can get information about the stuff in the way,
Mm-hmm.
but the stuff in the way is going to scatter all those wavelengths differently.
Yeah, because so we, especially with type 1A supernovae, which is kind of the category that this supernova falls under, we understand, or we say that we understand, like the physics of how they will explode really well. So we know theoretically like what the perfect light curve is supposed to look like. And so then we take that perfect light curve and we compare it to what we're actually seeing. And from that, we can tell, the difference between the two and make predictions about what's causing this light curve to not look like the theoretical light curve that we predicted.
Nice. And I guess that's the real power of this multi-wavelength stuff, because it's sort of like like you're trying to look at a black body curve or something, and you just sample a bunch of different frequencies in order to say, yeah, okay, that's the shape of the curve, but you have a mathematical model that tells you this is the basic shape of the curve.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Nice.
And
Thank you.
I noticed that your PI publishes like crazy, and I'm sure that pretty soon your name will start showing up.
Yeah, she's crazy. She's, yeah.
I think she has 8 or 10 papers out that say 2020 on them.
Yeah, yeah, she's a powerhouse for sure. She's, yeah.
all right, I think we have one more question from Matthew Altman, if he's out there and can turn his microphone on.
Matthew.
Hey Candice, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
All right, it's good to see you.
Good to see you.
And great talk. I had a question, just following up on some of what Drake was asking about too. Do you include any neutrino data in what you look at?
No, I have a friend who does though. So I don't know a lot about that, to be honest, but I am excited about that because I know that, like I was saying that we can't know exactly when a supernova is going to go off, but I know that one of like something that some people are looking at, not me, but neutrinos, they don't interact with matter in the same way that at all, really, or very, very little. In this light, the electromagnetic spectrum does interact with matter. But the point is that the neutrinos, these subatomic particles, get to us way before the light will ever get to us. So I have some friends that are looking into like, how can we detect these neutrinos and then maybe see if we can detect these neutrinos from a supernova, then we can point our telescopes over to the supernova before it ever goes off. And catch it, right at its birth. But yeah, I think that we're still a ways off from being able to do that. Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. Well, I want to thank everybody for attending our first virtual STEM talk. We are doing it. We are going to get through all this stuff. We're going to get through it together, and we're still going to be smarter on the back end, right?
Oh, so here's my new motto is stay positive, test negative. Yeah, thank you so much, Tori and Drake and Matthew and Ted. It's so good to see everyone, and Eric. I'm so happy to kind of see all of you guys again. So thank you.
Thank
And
you.
I wish I could meet the rest of you in person, but in next year.